supporting you guys. And now we will hop into this. So it is with great pleasure that I am welcoming Morgan and Caroline on this call. So Morgan is our current chair of, can you guys hear fine? Is there a weird sound or anything?
I'm getting weird frequency.
It might be me. Let me mute myself.
How about now? Yeah, it was you, Caroline. So just turn your mic back on whenever you're ready to talk. And if anything, maybe I can mute mine once you go. Maybe that'll help. So we have Morgan. Is it Chaw? I don't want to say it the wrong way. Chaw. Morgan Chaw. She is the current chair of Division I SAAC, current member of the NCAA Division I Board of Directors, current Ivy League student athlete representative, and a former gymnast at Cornell University. And we also have Caroline Lee. She is an incoming vice chair of Division I SAAC. She is the current Southland Conference student athlete rep, a current women's soccer player at Southeastern Louisiana University, and she serves on the COVID-19 advisory panel and the Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sports. So we have two very, very, very involved young ladies on this call, and I'm so happy to have them on. And so just would, of course, like to open it up to you guys in case there's anything you would like to start with before we dive into some of the questions I have. Morgan, with you being the chair, I'll start with you. If there's anything you want to start with or any opening words.
Thanks, Chris. I guess I just say thank you for having us on the call. I know that I know Ursula Gurney pretty well because I was on the committee on academics with her for a year, and so she and I have talked at length about trying to do more N4A SAAC collaboration. So when we got your email about this opportunity, we were really excited to start to bridge that gap. So thanks for having us, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion.
And Caroline, how about you?
Yeah, just kind of echoing what Morgan said, just very grateful to be able to speak with you all today. And we're grateful for N4A and just your support of student athletes and being open to hear what we're thinking and what we have to say and kind of helping us through this whole season of life all student athletes are going through. So thank you for having us.
Awesome. So let's get this thing started. So the first thing that I have is what areas do you feel there should be an increased emphasis on in light of the current economic environment, and why?
So I'll start and I'll just have Caroline follow up. And I think that there's a lot of things going on when you talk about what to emphasize in the current economic environment. I think the biggest thing is the expectations for in your positions working to support student athletes, helping them change their expectations of their competitive season. So the idea that, we all know that there have been massive cost reduction strategies to varying degrees across the board at universities, and that's going to look different at every institution, even within the same conference. And I think that student athletes, if they are able to compete, they should be mentally prepared to, not travel as far. The fact that their competition schedules are going to look different. They're not going to have the same athletic experience that they signed up for, that they're used to. And, just overall thinking, getting them to kind of think, what is my student athlete experience? What do I want it to look like? What is actually most important to it? Is it actually the number of contests or games that I am used to playing? Is it who I play? They're probably not going to see the same teams that they normally see, or travel as far as they normally do. And then the other big thing is mentally preparing for what's going to happen if somebody on the team were to get sick, or if you were to get sick. What does that look like? I know that we've all probably been reading D1 Ticker and different AD's responses for the approaches of, if a student athlete gets sick and just having to cancel the upcoming game because they can't travel the whole team. What does the protocol look like? And I think the key to really all of our, I guess, answers to the questions that we're going to be asked today, I think is going to be transparency. Like, the more transparent you can be with your student athletes, the easier it's going to be on their minds. And if you don't know the answer to something, that's fine. Like, tell them you don't know. And like, a lot of people don't have the answers, but as many answers as you possibly have, or even just thinking through different scenarios with them so that it helps empower them so they don't feel so powerless, and like they don't know at all what's going on. I think that in terms of the economic climate is a good way to start. And I'll turn it over to Caroline for talk about like the personal financial stress and stuff.
Right. I think that when we talk about this economic environment that we're in now due to COVID-19, there's kind of two ways we can look at it. Of course, our athletic departments are being affected by that. So kind of, as Morgan touched on, like, how can we help set those expectations for student athletes and, help them to understand, hey, we might not be traveling as much this year. This is what our program is going to look like for the next number of years. But also at the same time, we have to acknowledge, the personal financial stress that may be on many of our student athletes, and how, over 30 million people have lost their jobs or had hours cut due to this pandemic. And that's something that's very stressful on student athletes. They're young adults who, maybe still depend on their parents for financial sustainability, as well as those who are about to be graduating and going into the workforce. So I think just there's a lot of stress over that, something that it's hard to head around. So I think, administrators and coaches and athletic support staff just being as transparent and honest with student athletes as we can, and also just to be understanding that the student athletes' families might be in a hard place, and that may be causing kind of a lot of emotional.
Caroline,
you froze. If you want to hang up and like come back, maybe that would work.
Well, I know one thing I've seen people do is cut off their video and just talk without their video, and it helps. So I maybe text her and tell her that, Morgan. I didn't get her.
Yeah, she's texting. Oh, she said it crashed.
Oh.
It's okay. Hold on.
All right. Well, we can still keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward. Just fix it.
So along with that, also, you guys, as this isn't just supposed to be us three talking. Like, if y'all have anything to say, please feel free to either put it in the chat if they're in mid-conversation and you want to interrupt them, or just hop in between the question, because we definitely want you guys to have the chance to ask them a question, because I know I am going to go off script right quick if I can do that. So in saying that, Morgan, she brought up how we should be transparent with you guys. How would you say, as a current student athlete, would be the best way for us to maybe tell you guys that, hey, we're going to discontinue this specific team? Whether it be your team or a friend of yours team, like, does it feel worse when you guys find out through like a press release that your school is discontinuing a team? Or like, if you could shed maybe some insight on what you think.
Yeah, I think, yes, it would definitely feel worse finding out through a press release. When you think of, I'm sure many of you were potentially college athletes, or maybe new college athletes when you were in college. And you're not just friends with the people on your team, like, you're friends with other people in the athletic department. So maybe it was a men's soccer player that, you were really good friends with, and their team just got cut, and you found out through a D1 Ticker press release, or you found out through a USA Today article. That's not a way that you would want to find out for sure. I think that beating the media to it, and telling your student athletes is definitely the right thing to do. In terms of how you tell them, I mean, it goes back to being transparent. It's being as honest as possible and laying out the facts and saying, look, like, I really care about this athletics program, and this is what we're facing right now. If you try to get them to see in the shoes of the people who are making these decisions, what that feels like to be in your shoes. Like it's interesting because I don't remember what call I was on, but President Emmert was talking about it at one point when he was president of the University of Washington, and how he had to cut a program during the recession. I think it was the swimming program. And he said, it never feels good to cut a program. And I do believe him. Like, I don't think that, university officials I've had the privilege of actually working with people in the athletic department through the Division I SAAC position, and through SAAC on my campus. And, I know that people don't cut programs lightly. And I think that it's hard. It's really hard for a lot of student athletes to understand that, though, if they can't wrap their heads around why it's happening. So as transparent as you can be in terms of like, this is how much money we lost. Like, this is what we're facing. This is, if we don't do this, then, this is truly our, the last resort plan. We've exhausted all of their options. This is what we've done. These are the numbers we've come up with. And like, there's just no way out of this. And in order to sustain the college athletics program, the entire program, then we have to make these like very unfortunate and permanent decisions. Cause I think that's something that, is not really talked about as much, is that these aren't just temporary, when the group of 5 commissioners were seeking relief for certain sports sponsorship requirements. That's not temporary relief. Like, it's really hard to bring a team or a program back after you've completely cut it for 4 years. And so that's taking away, and thinking about the prospective student athletes. Maybe they have siblings who wanted to go to the same school as them. So I think just being as transparent as possible with the numbers and what you're dealing with, and how you have exhausted, showing them, I've exhausted all of these other options, then you can at least say that you did everything you could to, try to explain that you're really there to support them. You're not the bad guy, and that there are tough decisions that have to be made right now.
Anything you would like to add, Caroline? And in case you didn't hear the question, it was just, how would you prefer as a student athlete to find out about a sport being cut or anything like that?
Who's on mute? Oh.
I'm having very severe difficulty connecting. I'm not sure why. And I only got to hear the end of it more. Understanding that a lot of these student athletes don't understand, how financially destructive this has been. And so just being able to be transparent with them and walking them through it, and like, we know departments aren't.
I texted her and told her to turn her video off.
Administratives be more smoothly.
Okay.
Hey, Caroline, turn your video off. That might help. And just unmute yourself when you want to talk.
Yeah. And so the next one, in what ways do you think we could better support student athletes during this pandemic?
So that's a loaded question. I think it depends on like what you're already doing, but what we just said to the previous answers in terms of, the economic fallout.
Just to add to it, because like you said, it does kind of depend on what we're already doing, which I would agree.
Yeah.
So with you not having the knowledge of like what each one of us on this call or N4A is doing, are there some best practices that you've seen either people posting on social media or talking to your national SAAC reps? I guess the better question would be, what are some best practices in your opinion from a national SAAC standpoint of how we can support student athletes in this time?
I think just maintaining connection and maintaining an open space for them to go to when they find that they need support in something. And, we often say, it's okay to not be okay, but sometimes you don't. I've found that the biggest issue with college athletes is that they don't know that they're not okay, because it's just a culture of, I've been there personally, like you just keep pushing through, and until you are literally exhausted and don't know where else to go, then you're like, okay, I need some help. I need some support in this area, or in this, or in this area. And I think that helping it goes back to the expectations they have of themselves during this time. And that I think in terms of best practices, one-on-one conversations I think are really good. So I know that there are some universities who are doing that, and then there are some who are doing more kind of group Zoom calls, but maintaining that one-on-one relationship, whether that's over a video platform or just a simple phone call with a student athlete that maybe you used to see on a regular basis. And just checking in, like, hey, have you, what classes are you planning on taking? Like, how's your family doing? Like, how are you doing? Like, you want to talk about anything, and just like having that kind of personal relationship, I think is really beneficial during this time. And I think in terms of the pandemic as well, like I don't know how many student athletes have been affected by the pandemic personally, in terms of, whether a loved one has fallen ill or passed away, or whether they have fallen ill. I think that's another big thing is, and when it comes to expectations of themselves, both physically and mentally, we know that people who get really sick from COVID-19 have a depleted immune system, and it's going to be even harder for that. So not withstanding the fact that they haven't been working out to the same capacity that they were, without quarantine times, but if they also get sick, then it's going to be even harder for their body to get back in shape to where they were before. And I'm, no doctor or anything. This is just what I've observed from people who have gotten sick, who were like really good athletes. And Caroline can even speak to that herself. And I think just mentally speaking too, again, like maintaining that open dialogue. We talk a lot about how student athletes are anxious to get back to their sport because it's that one thing that grounds them. But at the same time, they're dealing with, depending on where they are in the country and how, I'm in California where we're like still in lockdown, and like you can't really do anything here. And then there are states which have completely started to open up. And so how student athletes individually feel about the severity of what's going on and how safe they feel going back to campus too is going to differ based on where they are in the country. So just kind of making sure that you're both communicating with the student athlete and also communicating with your superiors about how you best, what is it going to look like if a student athlete doesn't feel comfortable coming back to campus or coming back to play their sport? And I think that's a very serious and real concern that some people and some people's families will face. And are there going to be repercussions? Like, you don't want them to feel like they have to do this in order, and like put their life at stake or put their health at stake in order to play their sport because of a decision that their university made. So that was a lot. I'll see if Caroline has connected. You want to try to talk?
Yeah, sorry. Hopefully I've been trying to find, there's just bad service everywhere around here, but I'm full Wi-Fi, so I don't know what the deal is. But again, just kind of going off of what Morgan said, just communication is key through all this. I mean, the main thing that we see amidst this pandemic is a lot of stress and anxiety from lack of proper education or confusion or no knowledge. So I think we need to encourage all of the athletic staff, as soon as they hear anything about what the seasons might look at, can we communicate that to student athletes? Can we give them ahead of time kind of a preset knowledge of what the season might look like when it comes to traveling or practicing or, financial aspects of it? And I think also just encouraging our support staff to be open and vulnerable to listen to what the student athletes might be stressed out over, how this might have affected their life at home. As Morgan mentioned, like, is somebody in your family been sick? Has that caused a lot of stress on you? And also just kind of planning ahead of time. Yeah, what is it going to look like if one of my teammates contracts COVID, and what is that going to mean for our team and for the season and everything? And so I think that the best thing we can do is to be transparent and to educate and to give people proper information, because, anxiety, the root of anxiety is just not knowing what's next and, not having enough information. So if we can just properly feed our student athletes in an appropriate way that's, not overwhelming or overbearing or scaring them, but, just being able to communicate with them throughout this whole process and make them aware of whatever, the coach may know or the athletic department may know, and just, reassuring them that it's totally normal to feel disappointed or to feel scared or to feel anxious. And that's just kind of what life is going to be like right now. And, a lot of student athletes are still kind of mourning the loss of their spring season or their championship season if they're a winter athlete. And so I think vulnerability is another really important factor of, this new normal when it comes to college athletics. And when you combine vulnerability and transparency, that's when we're going to see a strong relationship between student athletes and, athletic support staff.
And something that you brought up that I kind of want to touch on, like the next question, and we'll start off with you this time, Caroline. So when it comes to that communication piece, like you said, right now, I'm sure y'all are getting buzzes in your pocket from social media. You're getting emails from everyone, and then you will have Zoom calls with your teams and everything. What is the best way, best method, or even time schedule that you guys think we should use when communicating with y'all? Because I know I can speak for most of our staff. People who work here, we get zoomed out at times because we have Zoom calls all day. And I'm sure it can be the same thing for y'all with class and coaches and teams. So what would y'all say from a student athlete well-being standpoint? What's the best method to communicate with y'all? What about maybe time scheduling also?
Yeah, something that Morgan and I were talking about the other day is that an important part of this whole season of pandemic is kind of trying to live life as normal as you can, although life is totally not normal right now, right? So, of course, Zoom tends to be kind of the number one method of communications for companies and businesses and teams and classes. And I think that's awesome. Just like you would have team meetings, if you were on campus and playing your sport. And I think that's an awesome thing. But I think one thing that we might have kind of lost touch with during this whole pandemic is that personal connection. So I just think about how often when I was a student athlete, how often I met one-on-one with my coach or one-on-one with my academic advisor. And so I think that's something that'll be really important for coaches and for athletic administration and support staff is to remember to connect one-on-one with those student athletes, and to know that sometimes a student athlete might not feel comfortable to speak up on a Zoom call with 32 of their teammates, and continually to have individual contact with those student athletes, whether that's via email or you call them or you text them. And so I think that's something that's really important, just to have them feel like they're being fully supported, that they're being fully listened to, and that they can, privately bring up any concerns or any questions that they might have. So I think Zoom is an awesome tool, and it's great. And to continue to have, team meetings as you would usually if we were on campus, but also that individual connection, and make sure that, we're reaching out individually and personally to student athletes as, much as possible.
And I think she might be doing something. Morgan, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
I do. Sorry, my dog just started barking. That's who I was yelling at. Okay, he's starting to stop. Sorry. The only thing I'd add is on top of the individual connection, I totally understand. Sorry, hold on. Uh, pick up the phone and call them. Like, the power of an individual phone call, like Zoom is great, but I totally understand what you mean. Like, you look at, like, if I were to look up from this screen, it's great that I can see all of your faces, but you're at the end of the day not in front of me, right? I'm just staring at a screen with all of your faces and we're having a conversation. So it's great, but like at the same time, that's not a normal human connection, right? The human connection that we feel is like being near each other. So sometimes, like, in order to create more of a normal space, like, pick up the phone and call them, because that's what you might even do if they were on campus and you just wanted to check in on them. And just hearing somebody's voice, like, I've had 2-hour long conversations with people before just on the phone call and not looking at them over a screen. So I think that Zoom fatigue is definitely a very real thing. And FaceTime fatigue, video call fatigue. So yeah, I think don't be afraid to just pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah, I feel like we have so many different platforms we can use that we can sometimes forget the most simple ones. And so in saying that, when it comes to the most simple way of communication, is often if we're in person and if Caroline comes in and sit in my office and she's a little droopy, then I might say, oh, looks like something's going on with you. Like, how can I help you? So like with us not being in person and able to help each other with those types of things, interested to know what is the best way for us to help you guys with the fears and stressors that y'all have, and we can't see you on a day-to-day basis and see how your personality is changing. Like, is it overbearing or annoying for a coach or an administrator to text you and say, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? Should that just be a call? Or, like, I guess just give us some type of insight. Is it the way that you're texting us? What's the best way for us to see that, in your opinion, that everything's not okay?
Yeah, I'll speak first on this. I think that, personally, I would much rather have somebody constantly reaching out and me not need them and just tell them, I'm doing well, thanks for checking in, everything's great, than to be in a place where I'm like experiencing a lot of anxiety or just having a lot of different thoughts and confusion and like not have anyone reach out to me and feel very alone and very hopeless. So I think that, sometimes as support staff, you might feel that, you're overreaching or being overbearing, or that your student athletes might not want to talk to you. But I mean, truthfully, 9 times out of 10, we're waiting for somebody else to reach out and to help us. And so I think that just continuing to reach out, whether that's, once a week, I think that's, appropriate. And either, the student athlete's going to say, I'm doing great, everything's okay. Or they're going to say, hey, I do really need to talk to somebody, or have questions about what preseason is going to look like now, or I'm concerned about this. Could you talk me through this? And so I think just, being available and, those student athletes knowing that you're readily available through text, through phone, through Zoom. And I know like it's kind of hard, as you explained, to read body language. You can't do that over text and over phone call, and you can kind of do that over Zoom, but it's different. So I think that's why it's important to, constantly be reaching out to these student athletes and just seeing how they're doing. And I don't know if Morgan, if you have anything to add to that either.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. And I think that in terms of how to tell whether your student athlete is struggling, it goes back to something I said earlier. Sometimes they don't even know that they're struggling because they just keep bottling it up. They just keep pushing forward. And I think, what you can do when you do pick up the phone and call them, or, email them. But I think that, phone calls are better because to hear their voice and for them to hear your voice. I think asking open-ended questions, and so really creating a space and allowing them to think through their own thoughts, and asking questions that are, as simple as how are you doing, but also more directed questions like, what are you doing right now to, support your mental health? Like, maybe not as direct as that, but, what are you doing right now for yourself that isn't, working out, that, is kind of your alone time? Are you doing anything? Like, start getting that, and, you know, hey, you know, I'm kind of, and you could even say things like, you know, hey, you know, I'm kind of worried about this, or not to make it seem like you're trying to put your problems on them, but to create kind of that I'm human too connection. And we all are, you know, dealing with this pandemic that's going on right now, and just kind of share like, oh yeah, you know, I had a call with someone, with a student athlete the other day who was telling me how he or she was a little worried about returning back to their sport. Like, do you share some of those same concerns? So, because I think a lot of times you usually feel like you're the only person who's experiencing some sort of like that feeling. So if you create, whether that, you know, conversation was true or not, like whether you actually did talk to a student athlete who expressed those concerns, just creating that open space for someone to share by using either open-ended questions or a little more direct questions that aren't yes or no answers, but that are more directed at to so that you can better assess yourself, like, okay, you know, like usually A, you can hear it in their tone of voice, but B, if they're covering something up, you might be able to get at something based on their answers. So, and yeah, I mean, at the end of the day too, you know, thank you for asking this question, because we, you know, you all are people who really do care about the student athletes on your campuses. But it's also not your entire, I think it's important for us to share to you that, you know, you all are human too, and that it's not entirely your responsibility to make sure, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but it's not just all on you to support the student athletes on your campuses, that you have a team of individuals around you. So if you do feel like you're concerned about somebody, talk to a CAPS provider on your campus, or talk to their coach and ask them, hey, have you been noticing any signs that so-and-so is feeling a little distressed? Because oftentimes if you notice something, even if it's something small, somebody else has also noticed something small, and putting those pieces together can paint a bigger picture about what might be going on and give you more information. So, you know, leaning on your other athletic department peers is also, I think, beneficial. Did you want me to answer the question in the chat box?
Yeah, I was going to read it for everyone.
Okay.
So, hypothetically speaking, if there hasn't been good communication from the athletic department, in your opinion, how would you suggest the department bounce back this late in the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever too late to start up that communication. And so don't be worried that, you know, enough communication hasn't been done up until this point. I think any communication is so valued. And as a student athlete, I always loved when staff reached out to me and checked in with me and asked to see if they could do anything for me during the time. And so I think don't be, you know, afraid that it's too late or too much time has passed. I think it's never too late, and that communication is always so valued. And like I said, I always loved and appreciated when staff reached out to me, and it made me feel loved and welcome and important, and it made me feel like I could be transparent and open to them if I was struggling with anything. So I would say definitely late is better than never, and don't be worried that the athlete has been, you know, hurt or anything by not having a lot of communication prior to it. I would say that, again, you know, late is better than never.
Yeah, and I think in terms of how, I echo everything Caroline said, and in terms of how, maybe just start with a simple email. Like, you know, it could be a generic one that gets blind copied to every student athlete, and that just says like, hey, and maybe create like an office hours type schedule for yourself where people can sign up and input the link there, so that, you know, saying, hey, you know, miss you guys, or miss you all on campus, you know, just want to check in, see how you're doing, see if I can help, you know, provide any updates or information or clarify anything that might be confusing to you right now. I know that there's a lot of misinformation and confusion out there. I just want to open up my door. Like, I'm always here. Even if you haven't sent anything to this date, like Caroline said, now is better than never.
On the flip side of that, what if a department has been sending out entirely too much? Is there a way for us to come back from that? Instead of us just going cold turkey and not sending anything else? I guess, one, is there a way to come back from it? And if there's anything that you guys seen that's been best, like maybe one message a week, just kind of y'all thoughts on just, I guess, the whole communication aspect as a whole.
Well, I think the first question that I would ask is, how do you know that you've been sending too much? Have you been getting, hypothetically speaking, have you been getting emails from student athletes saying, please stop sending me emails?
I know, at least for me, I can say that I've had one student, and honestly, he's kind of usually a Debbie Downer, always complaining about something, where like we send something out and he's like, hey, please remove me from these emails. And I'm like, you're on scholarship.
You can't.
Yeah. Emails. So, I mean, that guy, that's kind of different, him responding and stuff. But, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, this isn't the answer. Maybe Caroline has a different perspective on this. This is the answer you're probably looking for. But if you're sending out emails because you're doing your due diligence and you're checking in on your student athletes and you're making sure that they know that you're there to support them, and you think it's the right amount of emails that need to be sent or the right amount of communication that needs to be sent, like, by all means, keep doing it. Sometimes student athletes don't know what's best for them. And, from somebody who's been on a lot of listservs, like, think about it from the student athlete perspective too. Like, okay, I'm doing fine. I don't need all these emails, but what about that one moment when they're not doing fine and they realize that, and then they get one of your annoying emails in the mail and they're like, oh, maybe I actually want to like click on that today. And that's why you send them for that one moment or that one student athlete that might need it. And like, odds are most people aren't going to respond to you reaching out. But that one person that just needs someone in their life because they don't come from a good home environment, or, for X, Y, and Z reasons, they just don't feel like they have a support system and they need someone to talk to, like, that email is going to mean the world to them. And like, it's worth it to bother hundreds of other people if you can reach that one person.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with everything Morgan just said. And I mentioned this earlier, I would much rather you all send, 5 too many emails than, one less. And like Morgan said, they're 90% of those student athletes might not respond or might not need that emotional support, but there's going to be student athletes that do. And so it's it's way worth sending it all out and maybe kind of bothering some student athletes than not being readily available to that one student athlete that might really need you.
Well, I know that makes me feel better to hear that. And again, if you guys have anything else that anybody else want to ask a question, please feel free to. But would love to ask you guys for your opinion on us helping student athletes with that transition to life after college. So right now, again, we don't really see you guys like that. And who knows, you being at home during this maybe could have had you doing some self-reflecting and you think something different now. What are kind of y'all perspectives on how can we serve our student athletes in that transition to life after college right now, in the face of us helping you through the pandemic, getting you prepared for another season, getting you prepared for your housing? How can we still kind of diligently still inch you on to that point to where you are ready for that transition after college? Take your time to think, because this is a question off script.
No. I think it's a great question. I think it gets down to like the student athlete identity, it's a question. Student athlete development is like, while in college, and like personal and professional development is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And it's funny because I was talking to Caroline about this when we were talking about, potential questions for the call and stuff. And I am a year out of college now, and I was one of the biggest proponents of like, you need to like know that you're more than an athlete and more than a student. And I'm still one of those biggest proponents of that. But as much as I harped on that as a student athlete leader, like I did my sport. I was a gymnast for 18 years. And even when I was injured and developed an identity outside of my sport by force because I was injured, it's still, I competed my senior season, and all of a sudden gymnastics was again the center of my identity. And even if I didn't compete, like there would still be that sense of loss. And, at the end of the day, even when I was injured, talking about it from the athletic perspective, I always worked out, I cross-trained for the purpose of being a better gymnast. And that's like been one, so I say all of this from the personal perspective of, I had a lot of, I did have mentorship in terms of at my school about like, we had a leadership curriculum to teach you about the transferability of your athletic skills in the workplace. And I do think that that's something that I hope and wish that a lot of student athletes were to get. So whether that means just creating some sort of like generic questions to on a worksheet that you just send out to your student athletes to do over the summer, because God knows they probably need some more things to do. And just, get them to, or even host Zoom sessions with different teams and offer like kind of professional development workshops where you give them an interview question scenario that says, tell me about a time where you've had to overcome an obstacle. Like, what did you do and how did you get through it? And like give them the direction and the guidance to say, okay, think of a time in your athletics experience that you've done that, so that they realize that. I think that was like a year later, something that I've realized about myself is that I'm always going to be a gymnast, but that doesn't mean that I have to physically be doing the sport. Yes, like my heart aches. I wish I could still, jump on a trampoline or like go do a floor routine. But at the end of the day, I am who I am today because of my gymnastics and because I was a gymnast, and all the skills and everything I've developed have been, and everything I am today, how I see the world is from everything that I developed as a gymnast. And I think the more you can talk to your student athletes about the transferability of their football skills, of their volleyball skills, of like the experiences they've had in the classroom, and how those are relevant even after your college days, and that you're not going to lose that part of yourself even when you physically stop playing your sport. I think starting those conversations now and just have it like it might not make a difference now, but it will make a difference when they're in that position where they're no longer playing their sport.
Yeah, not to piggyback too much off of what Morgan just said, but again, how can we make the student athlete experience as normal as it can be in a time that's not very normal, right?
Yeah.
So can we continue to do Zoom calls where we do professional development? Can you do mock interviews with your student athletes? Again, Morgan kind of explained all this, but explain to them how their sport can be part of their identity, but it's not their total identity. It should be right off the bat, a student athlete should know, how do I include my student athlete experience on my resume? That should be like common knowledge. Same with when they're asked a question in an interview, how can they respond strongly and confidently and able to tie their athletic experience in, to an interview and show that they're a competitive applicant for whatever job or grad school position or whatever they might be going for. Just how can we prepare our student athletes to go out into the workforce equipped with leadership skills, that they learned on the field and on the court, but also valuable information that they've learned, in the classroom and outside of it in professional and leadership development, training these student athletes that this should be stuff, these answers to interview questions and what they put on their resume about their athletic experience should be, right there, right off the bat, off the top of their head.
I think the other thing that I'll add on to what we just said in terms of helping prepare them for life after college is that like make it normal, create a norm where they understand that it's okay if you have no idea what you want to do after college. Because just like, and use sports analogies, just like learning a new skill, just like learning a new play, you know, you have to, it's trial and error. And the more you figure out what you don't like it, this way, for example, use a basketball play or whatever, like, okay, this play didn't work for you, or this position on the field didn't work for you. So you tried this other position and then that worked, right? And you never played that other position, like you've never played that first position again. And using analogies like that to kind of tap into their athletics, like, that is why, and tell them things like employers love student athletes. Like, I don't know how many times I was told that in college, but they love student athletes because we understand the importance of hard work, perseverance, and teamwork, and working through challenges. And all of that is so crucial to any workspace environment and is so adaptable to any workspace as well. And so I think in terms of preparing them for life after college, just talk to them about like, hey, what classes right now interest you? Like, oh, you should talk to this alum, like, because this is what they're doing right now, or this is how I got to where I am today. And just ask them. I don't know how many times I did informational interviews with people as I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. And then, tell them that like the first job they get out of college is not going to be is most likely not going to be the job they do for the rest of their life, and that's okay. And they're still going to learn something valuable about themselves in that position.
Really, really quick, one thing that my dad used to always hound in my head, and, he always tells me old people like him love helping young people, but we don't oftentimes always know that. So as athletes, we might want to reach out to an alum or, make a connection with this, but we don't want to bother people and we don't want to be afraid. So I think just if you have any sort of connections that you can offer these student athletes, like, please do. We are always looking like for mentorship or for wisdom from people who are in the career that we want to go into. And so I think just continually expressing to your student athletes, if I can ever connect you with anyone, if I can help you with this, that's something that we always appreciate.
Gotcha. And so along with that too, in my opinion, what we're going through right now is probably the best real life example for them for how it is for a good amount of us. Like once you get to a certain point in your career, all of a sudden everything just stops. And now you're no longer an athlete and now you're making that transition. So if you had to use what happened right now with this pandemic, what would be the best way for some of us who create programs for student athletes? Actually, Derek, looked like you just went off from mute.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in with Morgan and Caroline. They were talking on something that I get really excited and passionate about when it comes down to the life after sports transition. And they hit on two things that was so relevant. And being a third party in this space, I get a chance to see it being overlooked at a lot of universities. So I can speak on it from a little bit of a different perspective. And the transferable skills piece, being able to speak the athletic lingo of, hey, talking about on the court, on the field, on the track, in the pool, and telling them how it correlates to something that's in a completely different space resonates with the athlete on a higher level. However, it's normally overlooked because we just think, hey, you learn this from sports and you think you know what these transferable skills are. But when they get into this life situation, they don't know how to take away those transferable skills, figure out how they correlate to where they're at or where they're going, and they know how to carry them over. So that particular piece right there, I've put a lot of energy into creating a transition playbook just for that particular topic, because that was something that I personally experienced and then seeing my teammates experience on a high level and on a low level. So they definitely spoke on that majorly. And then the second piece is knowing how to take those, doing that transferable skill assessment and realizing what things have I already grown throughout my life or my athletic career that was a crutch to me that I can use for my catapult, that I can use in the next phase of my life that's going to give me a skill set or unfair advantage. And when we think about sports, we always look for that unfair advantage or something that's going to get us ahead of the competition. where it's a lot of things that athletes already have that is normal to them, but it's not normal in the real world. So they don't see those skill sets or those tools and use them for their advantage. So if you could show them that and develop those things where they can have a transferable skill assessment, just like Morgan and Caroline was talking about, when they get into that new phase of life, they can understand that, hey, I've already got these skill sets. I'm not starting at ground zero. I'm starting at stage 65, and all I got to do is get to 70. I just got to build up those building blocks that the game has already gave me. So that right there got me excited. So I just want to chime in because y'all broke that down to the T, and it's not often I get a chance to hear it spoke to the people that's in student athlete development coming from student athletes, because they're already in the mix, in the grind, working, and got different things coming at them. And they don't often get a chance to hear the voice from the student athlete of what they need and what will help them. So whenever I get a chance to hear that, it gets me excited, because a lot of those things I've kind of created and want to be that resource and that tools for individuals who may need those things. So I won't talk too much because I know we're on a time restriction, but y'all spoke on some things that are near and dear to my heart and I believe are very valuable, speaking to athletic lingo and understand those transferable skills, the assessment of realizing how you can take them away, correlate them, and carry them over.
Thank you so much, Derek. We appreciate that.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. And I'm glad to hear that student athletes on your campus are getting that kind of education from you.
Thank y'all. Y'all did an incredible job.
Yeah. And go on, Morgan.
Oh, I was just going to add something that popped into my mind about utilizing what the current environment that we're in today. And I know that we talked about Zoom fatigue already, but, you know, engaging your alumni and, you know, I don't know how many of you on your campuses are doing, you know, for example, I'll use my sport, gymnastics. Like, let's say you have gymnastics on your campus, like a gymnastics alumni panel, and just have them get the current team members on the call and just have generic questions, literally go down the line and have alumni say what they're currently doing now with their lives. And, you know, something that they're at, and to share like a moment in their work environment or in their professional life where they've used something that they learned as, for example, a gymnast that helped them get through this challenge or this experience in their workplace setting. But because, you know, sometimes student athletes will hear it and listen to it better when it comes from one of their own. So whether that's an alum on their team who they respect and can also then professionally or like network with afterwards as well, like, oh, that job sounds interesting, I want to learn more about that. And then you have their contact information that you can reach out to them separately after that. But that was something that just popped into my head about, you know, the current environment we live in.
Yeah. And so with us we're right at 3:00, but what I do want to do as we are finishing up is just had some fun questions. Just wanted to ask you guys just to get some smiles going. And it's not just all serious, but during this pandemic, have you developed a guilty pleasure? To my two
Who's going first, Morgan?
You go for it. I have to think.
I don't know. I haven't really. I don't watch like TV or Netflix or anything. So there wasn't a show I was binge watching. I don't know. I really tried to use the, you know, time that I had. And at first, at the beginning of it, I work in a hospital. So life got a lot crazier instead of slowing down. And then things settled down a little bit. But I honestly tried to use it kind of as a time where I could, you know, really focus and better myself and kind of be healthier than usual. So I would say for me, it was a bit of kind of the opposite. I tried to be more regimented on, you know, my mental health and meditation and yoga and fitness and eating healthy. So I kind of spun it the other way, but.
Well, mine is going to definitely get some laughs then. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm 23 years old and I'm a year out of being a student athlete technically. But I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure per se, but I decided that my quarantine hobby was going to be learning how to be a bartender, because I'm looking for like some sort of part-time job for when I'm in grad school. So we have happy hour at my house like every night, and I'm a bartender, and I have all these like cocktails and stuff that I figure out I'm memorizing the recipes too. So that's my guilty pleasure.
I love it, Morgan. I'm coming over for happy hour.
All right. But even with that, like, I wish I had something like that. Like mine, I have a guilty pleasure of eating cereal at 1 a.m. in the morning and a massive bowl of it too. So I wish I had something that was better, that was at least better for me. Is there a strange habit that you might have developed during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's strange, but it's definitely unhealthy. I spend way too much time on my phone these days. I'm probably on my phone for like 2 hours before I actually go to sleep. Like I get in bed and I just immediately get on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I even start checking LinkedIn these days because I'm like, well, what's going on here? Yeah, but that definitely I need to read more.
Yeah, I think my habit, and actually I guess this could be guilty pleasure too, was just online shopping, spending like so much money. And I had just recently moved like to a new place, and so I was like redecorating everything and just like spending far too much money on home decor stuff. So that is a bad habit. The online, usually I'm not an online shopper, but this quarantine has made me that way. So that's my guilty pleasure and my habit.
So I have two more questions, then I'll let everybody go. So I guess, Caroline, you won't have one for this, but do you guys have like a favorite or a show you don't like that you've kind of adopted? Well, a favorite show you've adopted since you've been on the pandemic, and maybe a show once you started, you're like, no, and you just like shut it off.
I know I don't have an answer, Morgan. You'll have to take this one.
I've definitely binge watched shows, but in all honesty, like, so in this isn't really going to be a direct answer to your question, but my younger brother is also home right now. He's a sophomore at Temple, or just finished his sophomore year at Temple University. And then my parents. And so the four of us, we have like, in my family, we have like shows that we watch with each other. So, actually, I do have a show. As I'm telling this story, I realized there's a show. I was never really into The Bachelor or Bachelorette. Like, I could never really do that. But they came out with a new version called Listen to Your Heart, where it like incorporates music, and it's not just men choosing women or women choosing men. They like have to choose each other. And so it's a little more entertaining in my opinion. And there were only 6 episodes. And I got my dad to watch it with me. And so every Monday, he and I watch The Bachelor, Listen to Your Heart. Approximately every Monday. We record it if we missed it, but that's a show that I never usually watch before quarantine that we just finished last night.
Okay.
And I can tell you my dad would never watch it if I wasn't here either.
So for the last question, we're just going to bring it back into why we're all here. So from a student athlete well-being perspective, what was, or at least so far, probably for you, Caroline, since you're still a student athlete, what's the one thing from a well-being standpoint that probably had the biggest impact on your life from college? Whether that be a specific speaker that came in, or rather, I don't know what it could be, but from a well-being standpoint, what's the thing that had the biggest impact on
Yeah, so the first thing that kind of comes to mind, which this is well-being, but it's also kind of professional development, is that my school incorporated a kind of professional business luncheon. And so we had members of the community, whether they were alums or, former student athletes, and we had them sit at round tables, and then we had student athletes sign up ahead of time based on what career path they wanted to go into. So we had our pre-med students sitting and talking and networking with a doctor, and we had a CPA for our accounting students, and we had, entrepreneurs and people who own their own business. And so that was just a really awesome thing that my university did, or our athletic department did, and our student athletes loved it. And, people actually got jobs through it. I actually got a job at a hospital through it. I know a lot of people, that was at the end of my junior year. So I actually just graduated, but a lot of seniors at that point, we had it in April. So it was right before graduation. I know lots of seniors that ended up actually getting full-time post-grad jobs through it. And so that by far was like the most incredible thing that my athletic department did for us. So just, that was kind of more of a professional development thing. But I mean, of course, that's still a big part of well-being. And they offered a lot of mentorship for us student athletes. So that's the first thing that would come to my mind.
So I guess was your specific question something that the athletic department did, or just something as a student athlete?
It could be something as a student athlete.
Okay. So I think if I had to choose one moment that really changed my life in college, it was my end of freshman year, beginning of sophomore year. I started college as pre-med. So for those of you who weren't on at the beginning, I am going into sports management now. And I majored in global public health. And I started college as pre-med, and it was really hard. And I failed my first exam, straight up failed, even with the curve. And I remember just being like, I'm going to fail out of Cornell, and I'm not going to be able to play gymnastics anymore, and all that. And I remember going into the college I was in had a specific academic advisor for student athletes. And I ended up meeting with him, and I just talked to him about my worries about pre-med and just why I was pre-med in the first place and what I actually was interested in based on some of the classes I had started to take, and how I just didn't. But being an athlete, I was and he understood this part, which was what was great. I said, I don't want to just quit because it's hard. And I don't quit because things are hard. And I just don't know if I'm, quitting pre-med because it's too hard right now, or because I genuinely don't want to do it. And he helped me. And that conversation, it was supposed to be a half-hour meeting, but that conversation actually morphed into a whole person. So it was something political had just happened around that time as well. And he and I ended up talking for 2 hours, and I don't even know if he had any meetings after me, but we had a personal conversation about just life in general. And I explained how I was really passionate about gun violence and these social health issues. And I don't even think I was interested in sports at the time, but that those didn't have anything to do with pre-med. And by the end of the conversation, I was yeah, I'm not going to take the next chem class, and I'm going to take the baby chem class for my major, and going to take a break from pre-med. And that completely changed my life, because I remember the one thing that he said that was so meaningful in the conversation was, I think it was meaningful as a student athlete, from coming from the student athlete perspective. He said, it's okay to not like something because you're bad at it. And nobody had ever told me that before. Everybody was oh, you're not good at something, figure out how to get good at it. But sometimes it's okay to just stop if you're not good at something. You have to be good at it, and you have to enjoy it. So that's my story.
Well, definitely a good one. But really want to tell all of you guys, thank you for your time. We are